For 300 years, they were the most feared warriors who ever lived. The Spartans. A nation of soldiers so deadly, the mere sight of their red cloaks could win a battle before it even began. And then they were gone, not conquered in a blaze of glory, not wiped out in one epic last stand, just erased, faded into nothing. Today, the city that once made kings tremble is a quiet town in southern Greece. No great walls, no monuments, almost nothing. So how does the deadliest war machine in human history simply vanish? This is the story of the rise and the fall of Sparta. To understand how they disappeared, you first have to understand just how terrifying they once were. Sparta was not a normal city, it was a machine built for one purpose only: war. While other Greeks were sculpting statues and debating philosophy, the Spartans were raising the most ruthless army the ancient world had ever seen. It started at birth. A newborn judged too weak was, by some accounts, left to die. Only the strong were allowed to become Spartan. At age 7, boys were taken from their mothers and thrown into the agoge, a brutal training system designed to break them and rebuild them as killers. They were starved, beaten, and forced to steal to survive, then punished if they got caught. Not for stealing, for getting caught. By adulthood, a Spartan was not a citizen who could fight. He was a soldier who happened to be a citizen. War was his only profession. And it worked. On the battlefield, Spartans fought as one. A wall of bronze shields and spears called the phalanx, moving like a single deadly animal. They did not break, they did not run. To a Spartan, retreat was worse than death. You came home with your shield, or on it. But this perfect war machine had a dark secret, hidden beneath the glory. And in the end, it would destroy them. To free every Spartan man for war, someone had to do the actual work. The farming, the building, everything. That someone was the Helots, an entire population the Spartans had conquered and enslaved. They outnumbered their masters by as much as 7-1. Sparta was a tiny elite sitting on top of a massive, furious, enslaved majority. To keep them in line, the Spartans ruled through terror. Every year, they even declared war on their own Helots, so that killing one was never a crime. The whole system ran on fear. This was the engine of Spartan power, and it was also a time bomb. For a while, none of that mattered, because Sparta was about to step onto the stage of history forever. In 480 BC, the largest empire on earth invaded Greece. The Persians, led by King Xerxes, came with hundreds of thousands of men. And at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, they ran straight into a wall. King Leonidas and a small force led by 300 Spartans. For 3 days, that tiny force held off a massive empire. 300 Spartans against an army that, legend says, drank rivers dry. They were finally betrayed, surrounded, and killed to the last man. But their stand became immortal, the ultimate symbol of courage against impossible odds. But that legendary stand was only broken by treachery. A local man, deformed and despised, crept to the Persians, dreaming of gold and glory, and showed them a hidden mountain path that led right around the pass. It doomed the 300, but the traitor's reward never came. With the Persians soon defeated, he fled with a price on his head, was hunted down and killed. In Greek, his very name still means nightmare. Thermopylae turned the Spartans into a legend that has lasted 2,500 years. But legends and survival are two very different things. After the Persians were driven out, Sparta stood as the greatest military power in all of Greece. Only one rival could challenge them, the brilliant, wealthy, ambitious city of Athens. And the two giants went to war. The Peloponnesian War dragged on for nearly 30 brutal years, tearing the entire Greek world apart. And in the end, Sparta won. Athens fell. Sparta now stood alone at the very top, the undisputed master of Greece. This was the peak, the absolute height of Spartan power. They had everything. And it was at this exact moment that the cracks began to show. Remember that perfect, ruthless system? It had one fatal weakness: numbers. To be a true Spartan warrior, you had to meet brutal standards: own land, pay your way, pass every test. Fail, and you lost your status. Over the generations, the number of full Spartan citizens didn't grow. It shrank, and shrank, and shrank. Land fell into fewer and fewer hands, families died out. The elite warrior class was quietly bleeding to death. At Thermopylae, Sparta could field thousands of elite soldiers. A century later, that number had collapsed to barely more than 1,000. The most feared army in the world was running out of the one thing it could never replace: Spartans. They had built a society so rigid, so obsessed with purity, that it could not refill its own ranks. The machine was eating itself. And then came the day the legend died. In 371 BC, Sparta marched against a rising power to the north, the city of Thebes. The Thebans had something new, a brilliant general named Epaminondas, and bold tactics the old Spartan system had never faced. They met on a field called Leuctra, and there the unthinkable happened. The Thebans shattered the Spartan line, the unbeatable phalanx broke. A Spartan king lay dead on the field, along with the heart of the army. In a single afternoon, the myth of Spartan invincibility was destroyed forever. The world watched the legend bleed. But the real death blow came next. Epaminondas marched south into Spartan territory itself, something no enemy had done in centuries. And he did the one thing that could truly kill Sparta: he freed the Helots. He marched into Messenia and liberated the enslaved people whose labor had fed the entire Spartan war machine for 300 years. In one stroke, the engine was gone. Without the Helots, there were no farms, no food, no free time to train an army of full-time warriors. Sparta did not fall in a single great battle. It was unplugged. What followed was a long, quiet humiliation. Sparta shrank into a minor power, then a small city, clinging to its faded reputation while the world moved on without it. When Rome rose to swallow Greece, Sparta was no longer a threat. It was a curiosity, a tourist attraction. Wealthy Romans actually visited Sparta to watch boys be whipped in brutal rituals, a theme park version of the warrior culture that once ruled Greece. The terror of the ancient world had become a show, a faded memory selling tickets to its own legend. And then, even that faded. The warriors, the kings, the unbreakable phalanx, all of it dissolved into dust and ruins. Sparta was never truly conquered. It was never wiped out in one glorious battle. It simply rotted from the inside until there was nothing left. A nation that built everything for war forgot how to do anything else. And when war itself changed, it could not. The most feared warriors in history vanished, not with a roar, but with a whisper. Undone not by an enemy, but by themselves. 300 years of terror, 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, one of the greatest legends the world has ever known. Gone.